the American right to burn the flag was guaranteed by the people who carried the flag in battles over the past 200 and almost 50 years of our history. And it's an unfortunate thing that we have lived with, but it actually works better that people are allowed to do it than if they aren't allowed to do it. So if you're curious, I think most people probably do know the reason that this is being discussed is because President Trump has proposed, or he supported a proposed amendment forwarded by Steve Daines of Montana to ban flag burning. It's not likely to reach beyond the floor of the Senate, where it probably won't get enough votes to become an amendment, not in the Senate, and most certainly not in the House. Regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, I think that this is an amendment to oppose. So people should be aware that what he's doing is still what he's supporting is still a constitutionally sound idea. It's not a constitutionally smart idea, but it is sound. Because if he was to implement something like this through a simple law or executive order, of course the Supreme Court would just strike it down and say, this is unconstitutional, violates the First Amendment. This would be an amendment that creates an exception to the First Amendment where some form of freedom of speech is prescribed. In this case, burning the American flag. And therefore, if you were to create an amendment, it would become constitutional. But just because something becomes constitutional doesn't mean that it's the greatest idea. Remember that in, I think it was 1919, the U.S. imposed the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, the one prohibiting the sale of alcohol in the United States. And so it had the best of intentions. There was the Anti-Saloon League and the temperance movement, and they want people to live a more moral life. They want husbands to come home and not abuse their wives or neglect them or something. And it was a colossal failure because in the 20s, of course, with the booming economy and the loose morals and the jazz music and the bootlegging, people made a joke out of this amendment, and people drank just as much as they did before. In fact, there were a lot of people who ended up getting real health damage or even dying because of illegal alcohol that was produced, wood alcohol, methanol, or whatever, bathtub gin. So we have a history of things that are made illegal in the name of creating a better society that actually create other problems that nobody ever dreamed of. And in the case of flag burning, if we were to pass some sort of ridiculous amendment like that, and you have people like Candace Owens and Donald Trump who are saying, well, I think it's Candace Owens, but from one source I heard that Trump also agrees with this. Well, you would essentially, if you did this, the penalty would be that eventually you'd have to give up your citizenship. It might sound smart, but the fact of the matter is that you see things that are going on where American flags are printed on napkins. People wear pants that have American flags on them. That's just as much desecration of the flag, according to flag etiquette, as burning it. So where does it stop? And are we going to start seeing people being reported who had, the act of burning the flag, I think, does need willful intent, but some other things that people end up doing could be, you could be accused of doing things that are desecrating the flag. So I don't know where it ends. I know that censorship as a whole is something that never works, in my experience at least. Okay, maybe you come from a country where it does. You're free to tell me where it did work. But the idea that Candace Owens, who I've always been very suspicious of her motives, not just me, a lot of other people, but I respect her intellect. This is really something where you have to question her judgment and the wisdom of her publicly saying something like what she said. Much worse than any of the other things that she's ever said some of the things that she, and this goes back to the things that people were accusing her rightly of, and justifiably considering whether to trust her or not, with the social autopsy page and monitoring people's bullying and stuff like that. This shows an authoritarian core to her personality, and it's a problem, and you can't ignore it. There's some things that you can appreciate that are good about her, and there's some things that you just have to acknowledge. They're really very concerning about Candace Owens. And not just her, but other people who are in the conservative movement who would move against civil liberties and have us live in a country where it's essentially, just blind patriotism without any appreciation for the reasons we are proud of this country. We are proud of a country where people are allowed to publish things, at least they're supposed to be allowed to publish things that are against the grain of contemporary social norms. And it's one of the problems that you have when you're pro-civil liberties. I happen to be one, I hope a lot of you are as well. But you have to think about it. There are certain laws that supposedly they're there to help you that are being proposed, that if you look at it in the long run, it is not going to help you. Excellent example from a few months back, the anti-BDS legislation, which I've written stuff about, and I've also talked to the HB channel for, talked to a number of people about, try to keep the conversation very topical and, not to, heighten the tensions between people. But you can't let it go when people say, well, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is hate speech, and it leads to anti-Semitism, and therefore we have to ban it. It's not going to work. You don't understand. First of all, there are constitutional protections, and there are courts that would rule it to be unconstitutional. So that you have to start with that. So there is a battle to be fought, and if you're on the side of these laws, and you could very well lose it. And losing a court case based on, on free speech grounds is a huge embarrassment. It's a humiliation, and you might as well not get into that situation. But these people won't listen. It's very frustrating if you're coming from my end. So I don't have any interest in supporting the BDS movement. I happen to be former IDF. Okay, I live in this country. I see people who are very much pro-Israel. I see a lot of people who are very much anti-Israel. And I think that it's better to have a society where both are able to voice their opinions constructively, as opposed to harassing each other or creating laws to restrict one another's speech. But you have to also observe that there is abusive and harassing behavior, especially from activists who are BDS people. That doesn't mean that the concept of advocating for a certain policy of boycotting, a country, in this case Israel, that it should be made illegal. It doesn't mean that we should have laws to make the concept of doing something that is not harming other people, that should be made illegal. You can't create a cure that's worse than the disease. That's really the problem that we're talking about here. So the bottom line, before we go on too long, for this Monday morning, and I hope that you enjoyed your weekend and your Father's Day, if you did celebrate Father's Day, or if you called the sheriff's deputy on your deadbeat dad or something, whatever happened, you should always remember that the reason that the flag is worth saluting is because we have a country where people fought so hard so people would have the right to desecrate the flag. The more we create reasons for people to desecrate the flag, the more we intervene in other countries, the more we restrict what people are allowed to say here, the more we promote censorship and promote a less free society here, the more reasons there will be for people to burn flags. Not just people who are quote-unquote leftists or progressives or whatever. There will one day be, under the right conditions, people who are on the other side of the spectrum burning the flag. Look at the Confederacy. That didn't happen out of nowhere. We want to create a country where civil debate and The acceptance of different perspectives is something that is acceptable, and that's what will create true respect for the flag. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds and on Subscribestar if you want to donate. My screen name on all those is @ChefLeopard, and on Gab @Starscream85. Also now on Parler @RazorRay. And have a great rest of your day.